Second till everything's going. All right, we're good. Welcome to my weekly live stream. I like to do little bits about yoga philosophy and practice and things like that. And today I'm talking about neuroscience and your third eye. I got a really good question the other day. I was like, what is this third eye thing? Why are you talking about the third eye? It's interesting because you see it a lot. You see the third eye a lot in Indian iconography. Like you'll see Shiva with his third eye like this often. And of course, it's a symbol of great inner knowing and wisdom, but also the third eye in anatomy is called the parietal eye. And it's a real thing for amphibians, for lizards and stuff. They have an eye that's usually up here and it's covered with a little bit of skin, but it is photosensitive, so it pays attention to the light, and it helps with thermal regulation, and of course with the regulation of your body temperature. And it's also helps. It's also called the pineal eye sometimes, parietal, pineal, third eye. So what does the pineal gland do? It's very much it's involved in many things, but the main thing that we understand it being involved in is regulating the circadian rhythms and sleep cycles, right? So that means in these animals, by the way, no mammals have third eyes, but in some frogs and lizards and stuff, they have this third eye up here, and it helps them to know when it's time to go to sleep, and tuning into the light, and then thermal regulation is a big one. So that's kind of like the anatomy part of what the third eye is. It's a really good question, by the way, because it's sort of like in the yoga world, I'm always spewing out things like, hey, put your third eye on the mat. And people are like, what? What's my third eye? So the piece of it for human beings that's interesting in terms of the neurobiology is that this part, the third eye is right here. I'll talk about the yoga implications in a moment, but let me talk about the neuroscience first. It's right here, and it's a part of the brain called the orbital medial prefrontal cortex, which kind of goes underneath your eyes. There was this guy named Phineas Gage, and he got a pole shoved through his head once, but he didn't die. It just kind of damaged his orbital medial prefrontal cortex. There's tons of, I think it actually went through his eye. I don't know. It was really gross. And I think he was working on the railroads like 100 or 120 years ago. I don't remember all the details, but the story is often used to explain why you need your orbital medial prefrontal cortex, because it helps with inhibition. It helps with, what's the word? It helps inhibit things that you might want to say and do that you shouldn't that aren't socially acceptable. That's one of the things. It's an inhibitory control. So it inhibits, because this part of your brain is very much connected right with the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, right? So one of the things they noticed with this guy Phineas, who got the pole through his head, was that he was a really affable, nice guy beforehand, and afterwards he was really socially inappropriate and not very nice anymore. So it changed his personality so dramatically, and they started to realize that this part of the brain was very much involved in impulse control and inhibiting our behaviors that are not socially acceptable. So we know that that's one thing, but let me say something else about the orbital medial prefrontal cortex, which is that Andrew Newberg who's at, I think, Jefferson Hospital University and studies neuroscience and spirituality. And he says that, and some of his studies showed, and this has actually been showed in other studies like Lisa Miller at Columbia too, that when you meditate, you get more gray matter right there. That's crazy. That just makes me go, whoa, because the yogis were always like, focus right there when you meditate. And they still say that, it's a long part of the tradition that this is the one, and there's other focal points. So that's one of the main focal points for meditation. Sorry, I didn't mean to give you the finger there. Just pointing to this area. Andrew Newberg says that area grows, you get more gray matter there. What does that correlate with? Better inhibitory control, not just like things spilling out of your mouth that shouldn't spill out of your mouth. Better decision making, and then that impulse control, not doing things that they're saying things, and that may be socially inappropriate. So that's interesting. Now, the last thing I want to say about the orbital medial prefrontal cortex is scientists really don't know much about it at all. They have a couple of ideas about what it might do, but as many neuroscientists have said, if the brain was so simple that we could understand it, we would be too simple to even think about understanding the brain, right? So it's so complicated, but we're starting to get some glimpses of it. And I do think that yoga and the yoga tradition and the meditation traditions from yoga are going to kind of, start seeing some of what they've been teaching coming into the scientific reality as the scientists catch up with what the yogis understood. Because let's go to what the yoga tradition says. This is Agya Chakra, and it's not pronounced Ajna, sorry. It's Agnya or Agnya. It's more of a G than a J sound, which means the command center. Agnya Chakra is the command center, and that's the focal point, or the kshetram, the focal point, the field of that chakra. And there's been many people who've said that it does correlate with the pineal gland. Potentially, the pineal gland is another mysterious gland. It has something to do with, as I said, thermoregulation and certainly circadian rhythms, cycles, and sleep. Melatonin, produces melatonin. So there's that, but the yogis would say that the pineal gland is much more than that, and it connects us to all of our emotions and helps us. And as we concentrate here, we help to have more control over those emotions so that we can have a more expanded sense of self. So this is a very important focal point in the yoga tradition. And that's why you see Shiva with the third eye here. This is why the tradition of wearing the bindi started. So have you seen like Vandana Shiva, for example? She has an enormous red bindi here that she wears made out of powders. And then they make all those pretty little beaded bindis with little sticky on them that you can stick on your forehead. So that whole tradition of wearing bindi comes from the awareness that this is such an important part of the anatomy. I even have a friend who's from South India, whose parents, when he was a child, his parents tattooed a bindi on his third eye. So like it's very, very common from the subcontinent, from the Indian subcontinent, to acknowledge this part of the body as very sacred. It's very important and very sacred. It's just not, except for like when the bindis were popular about 10 years ago, you don't really see it that much in the Occidental or the Western tradition, but it certainly is a long historical part of the yoga tradition and of the tradition from, the Sanatana Dharma or the Vedic traditions. Like it's been there for a long time. And it's that dot on the third eye is a way to remember, now you can put a dot on your third eye as much as you like. And also there are yoga postures that often will tune into this. One of the things that people often tell me is their nose is too big to get there in yoga poses. So one of the things I like to use is a block. I'm going to show you one of the ways I like to kind of remember that area or stimulate that area. That's with asana. I mean, I use it all the time with meditation, but with asana, you can use a block, and you put the block on the floor here, and then you put your forehead on the block, but not your nose. Try it if you have a block around. If you don't, you can use a book. And so something that's a little bit firm. And then when you're in child's pose from here, you can do just a little side to side with my hips and my head going side to side here. I really love this as a forehead massage, as sort of a let go of being on the computer for 8 hours today massage, dumping emotional stuff that's on my mind massage, any of that stuff, just like let it go. So that's one of my fun favorite things to do for my third eye in terms of asanas. meditating on this point is a very, very common and traditional technique in the yoga traditions. So I hope this was helpful and interesting. And if you have questions like that you would like to ask me, feel free to leave them in the comment, and I will make videos about them. I'll make videos in the future about them. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week. Bye.